Before a single bullet left a barrel, the decisions that would cost the most lives had already been made, not in bunkers, but in engineering rooms where men drew lines on paper and did not yet know what those lines would mean for millions of human beings. The weapons were not glamorous. They were small, cheap, and ordinary looking. And that was exactly why they would kill more soldiers than almost anything else in the deadliest war in history. Walk any WWII battlefield today and you will find not bullets, not tank treads, but shell craters, hundreds of them, overlapping, stretching to the horizon. The reason is simple and brutal. Artillery and mortars caused the majority of all combat casualties in the Second World War. Historians estimate between 55 and 61% of all wounds and deaths among fighting soldiers came from explosive shells and mortar rounds. The German 80mm gun, the 8,8, became the war's most feared artillery piece. Originally designed in 1936 as an anti-aircraft weapon by Krupp engineers, it was a lean, angular cannon built to bring down bombers. Nobody anticipated what would happen when someone tilted it horizontal. That revelation came first in the Spanish Civil War in 1937, where German advisors noticed its flat, high-velocity trajectory could punch through armor plating. By the time Erwin Rommel, sharp-eyed, perpetually sunburned, his peaked cap tilted at the angle of a man permanently in motion, unleashed the 88 against British tanks at Gazala in Libya in 1942, it had become a universal weapon. Anti-aircraft, anti-tank, anti-infantry. The British called it the 88, with a mixture of awe and dread no other German weapon inspired. But the 88 was a specialized weapon. The true mass killer was something far less glamorous. The 81mm mortar was the most democratic killing machine of the war. Every army had one. The Germans had the Granatwerfer 34, the Americans the M1, the Soviets the PM41. Light enough to be carried by 3 men, it could be set up in minutes and fired from behind cover without the crew ever seeing their target. Its shells arrived nearly vertically, meaning there was almost no safe side of a wall or hill. On the Pacific island of Peleliu in September 1944, Japanese defenders had pre-registered mortar positions on every coral ridge and jungle clearing, every spot a Marine might instinctively sprint toward for cover. As the Americans advanced through jagged limestone outcroppings, mortar shells fell with precision that seemed almost personal. The 1st Marine Division suffered 6,500 casualties in 2 months on an island barely 6 miles long. The mortar redefined the psychology of infantry. Rifle fire could be traced and returned. Artillery had rhythms soldiers could sometimes anticipate. But mortar fire was intimate, immediate, and untraceable. A 3-man crew could drop 10 rounds in 60 seconds and vanish. The shells arrived without warning, killing not just with blast and shrapnel, but with the particular terror of complete randomness, the conviction that no amount of skill or courage could protect you. If artillery killed more soldiers in total, no single weapon changed the geometry of infantry combat more completely than the German MG-42. Born in 1942 in the factories of Grossfuss AG in Döbeln, designed by engineer Werner Gruner with one unglamorous goal, mass-produce cheaply, operate simply, deliver overwhelming fire, the MG-42 fired at 1,200 rounds per minute, roughly 20 bullets per second, nearly twice the rate of the American Browning or the British Bren. When fired in short bursts, it produced a sound unlike any other weapon in the war. Not the slow, recognizable rat-tat-tat of earlier machine guns, but a single tearing scream, like canvas being shredded by an invisible hand. American soldiers called it Hitler's zipper. Every soldier who heard it for the first time flattened himself instinctively against the earth. A single MG-42, properly positioned, could deny an infantry company of 200 men the ability to cross 400 meters of open ground. This was not theory. It was demonstrated repeatedly and bloodily on every front. On D-Day, June 6, 1944, German machine gun nests on the bluffs above Omaha Beach tore apart the first waves of the 1st and 29th Infantry Divisions as they waded from their landing craft. Company A of the 116th Infantry Regiment from Bedford, Virginia, lost 91% of its men in the first 15 minutes. Entire squads were cut down before they left the water. Survivors pressed themselves against a low seawall and did not move for hours. The soldiers who crossed that beach and lived remembered one thing above all others, not bombs, not artillery, but the sound of the MG-42 on the bluffs tearing the air above their heads. For all the dominance of artillery and machine guns, the rifle remained the weapon every infantryman carried every day, slept beside, and cleaned in the dark by touch. The Soviet Mosin Nagant, a bolt-action design dating back to 1891, was technically obsolete by the time of WWII. Slow to reload, awkward in close quarters, brutal to maintain when temperatures fell to -40 degrees, and a poorly lubricated bolt could freeze solid and jam at the worst possible moment. But it was nearly indestructible, accurate to 800 meters in skilled hands, and simple enough for a conscript with 2 weeks of training. The Soviet Union produced over 17 million of them during the war. They were in the hands of the soldiers who fought at Stalingrad. 6 months, building by building, room by room, 2 million casualties, until February 1943, when the German Sixth Army surrendered in the ruins. The American M1 Garand was the war's most technically impressive infantry rifle. Semi-automatic, 8 rounds fired as fast as a soldier could pull the trigger, compared to the bolt-action carabiner 98K's 1 round per manual cycle. General George Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. In terms of raw infantry firepower, he was probably right. But the rifle never won battles alone. It won battles combined with everything else: the artillery preparation, the machine gun suppression, the mortar cover, the coordination of arms that turned individual weapons into a killing system. No account is complete without the weapon that killed without a soldier's hand on a trigger. The German Schumann 42 was made almost entirely of wood, making it nearly invisible to the metal detectors of the era. Small enough to be buried in minutes, cheap enough to be scattered by the thousands, powerful enough to sever a foot or leg with the casual certainty of a mechanical process. It did not aim. It simply waited. In Italy, in the grinding Allied advance through 1943 and 1944, through the mud of Anzio, through the shadow of Monte Cassino, Allied engineers clearing minefields suffered some of the war's most quietly terrible casualties. Men probed the earth inch by inch with bayonets, searching for the slight resistance that meant a buried mine. The casualty rate among those teams was appalling. The stress was indescribable. The Germans laid millions of mines across North Africa, Italy, France, and Eastern Europe. The Soviets laid an estimated 222 million mines during the entire war, turning whole regions of Western Russia into landscapes that remained dangerous for decades after the last shot was fired. The statistics, when you hold them, are almost too large to comprehend. An estimated 70 to 85 million people died in World War II. Perhaps 20 to 25 million were soldiers killed in combat. Behind each number is a face, a name, a village, a letter that arrived too late or not at all. The guns that killed the most were not secret weapons or technological marvels. They were mortars fired from behind hills by tired men who never saw who they hit. They were machine guns operated by 2 soldiers lying in a shallow pit. They were shells produced in factories by women who had never been near a battlefield. The most lethal weapons of history's most terrible war were systems, the industrial marriage of engineering, logistics, and tactics that allowed governments to project violence at a scale no individual human being could fully grasp. The 88 is in a museum now. The MG-42's descendants are still in production. The Mosin Nagant can be bought at a gun show for $100. The craters at Stalingrad have long since grown over with grass. The dead remain exactly where they fell.